As Florida's space industry strives to become a national leader in aerospace, commercial flight, and space exploration, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead?
Texas, Virginia, Colorado, New Mexico, California, all want what Florida has had, and we're going to have to compete heavily to retain and to attract that next generation of entrepreneurs.
We'll talk with Space Florida's CEO, Frank DiBello, next on Metro Center Outlook. Hello, I'm Diane Trees. The space industry in Florida is undergoing a metamorphosis. Diversification along with commercial applications are key elements in its transition. Joining us today is Frank DiBello, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Space Florida. Frank, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and it's good to be here, Diane.
Good to see you again. Let's talk about the organization of Space Florida, what it is and what your mission is.
Space Florida was created by the legislature in Florida as a public corporation, primarily focused on the growth of the aerospace industry in the state. We have two roles. One is to be the spaceport authority for the state and to ensure that the state has the right infrastructure to allow it to grow. And then the other is to assist, as part of the governor's economic development team, the growth of aerospace throughout the state. More general aerospace, meaning everything from aviation to aerospace platforms to all of the disciplines in aerospace. We are a leader in the aerospace industry as a state, and I think we're all committed to just keeping us there.
So you coordinate a lot of your outreach then with NASA, with Kennedy Space Center, with the other economic development agencies over in Brevard, I would think.
Very much so. Traditionally, Brevard, Florida's history in space is a storied one. It's the past 50 years, but it's been conducted primarily by federal government, the Department of Defense and the Air Force at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and by NASA at the Kennedy Space Center. And we will continue to have a very robust program in each of those, but the real trend and what we are focused on is the growth of the commercial industry and commercial players into space markets.
Now, when the Space Shuttle program closed, a lot of people said we needed to look for another big project to fill that void. You said we needed to diversify. Why take that route?
Well, if you take a look at our history, and we're not the only place in the country that has been significantly damaged or hurt by an overdependence on one large federal program. And we've allowed that to happen twice. I think that while we welcome large federal programs, we want to ensure that our future is a diversified one, and not just in space, but in a variety of disciplines and market sectors that use the kind of aerospace technologies that we are well known for here in Florida.
Now, you mentioned commercialization. What are the areas that you're diversifying?
Well, it's in multiple, because all three market sectors are changing. The Department of Defense and the national security missions that we fly out of Florida will continue to be robust for the next decade. We should see that market sector growing, launching 15 to 20 rockets a year, or satellites a year, and that's 1 to 2 a month. So it's a pretty robust battle rhythm, right, if I may use that term. The civil agencies, NASA in particular, and some of the other, the National Oceanographic Administration and others that are looking at weather and Coast Guard, there will be a variety of missions that they will launch. But NASA is transitioning to a next generation of space exploration, and they're looking out. They're looking out beyond the region of the International Space Station. They'll continue to operate the International Space Station, but they're going to be depending more and more on commercial companies to support that activity, as well as commercial industry is looking at a variety of applications for low Earth orbit. And that includes going up there for research purposes, for space tourism purposes, going up there to visit man-tended platforms to conduct a variety of missions that can be beneficial to mankind.
Why is Florida in such a good position for next generation aerospace? Why are we poised for some of these excellent things that hopefully will happen?
Well, I think there are a variety of reasons for that, but number one, and I commend the governor's office for this, but we continue to develop Florida as a place to do business in. So the business environment that we've created with a low tax structure and the regulatory environment conducive to opening up a business here and allowing it to grow, that's a foundation for it. The second thing that we have is an abundance of trained workforce, skilled workforce that is envied by many, many industries, especially the aerospace industry. And the third, we're pretty aggressive at marketing both internationally and in other states where aerospace companies are struggling now under aged capital plant and equipment that is not easy to refinance in this era. Tax structures have become burdensome, as have the regulatory environments in those states. And not to pick on California or some of the northern states, but that's where aerospace industry has traditionally been strong, but it's become very difficult for them to continue. So as they look at next generation programs, we're not trying to pull them out of those states, pull their headquarters necessarily out of but their next generation programs we are trying to bring here.
So you're saying we're placed well for incentives to offer aerospace companies that are looking to do business possibly in Florida?
I think incentives are important, but what those companies really care about is that their business will thrive, that we can make it easy for them to come here. That's where the incentives may come in. But more importantly, that once they're here, they can grow and operate and thrive. And that's what we really concentrate on.
Now, you used a term, I've heard you say it, space entrepreneurship. What do you have in mind with that? Is that partly because of the workforce, the talent, the intellectual capacity of the people that have worked here previously and now they're turning to new businesses? Or?
Well, I think if you look at what the space industry has done, as NASA and the federal government in the past 50 years have done some difficult things in space, they have advanced technologies in a whole variety of areas. But it's entrepreneurial companies in the U.S. that take those technologies and apply them to a variety of both Earth applications as well as next generation space applications.
What do you see as Florida's biggest challenges that will impede us from that quest to become the leading state in the space industry?
Well, I think we need to be willing to change. We need to be willing to recognize that just because we've had a storied history in space, that it is not our birthright and that we are going to have to compete heavily for it. So complacency is one of those challenges. We need to change with the times and face the markets. The drivers for the next generation of space activity are going to be largely commercially driven. And we need to be able to continue to create the kind of environment where commercial companies can come here and operate. And that's oftentimes difficult.
A cultural change or shift takes a time to make. Right, right. Sometimes our governmental bureaucracies are not as timely to work through when you need decisions. I would think with the competition, other states are trying to compete for the same businesses that we are as well.
Well, very much so. I mentioned that there were some 34 spaceports around the world that are today either existing or planned. Other nations are seeing that they want to get into the space industry because space technology, they see it as a catalyst for economic growth and for creating the kind of innovation economy that they want. But there are some 14, soon to be 17 spaceports in the U.S. that are either existing or planned. And Texas alone is going after the development of 4 spaceports. Texas, Virginia, Colorado, New Mexico, California, all want what Florida has had. And we're going to have to compete heavily to retain and to attract that next generation of entrepreneurs.
So is Florida working positively to do that? Do we need to do some other things? Does our legislature need to be aware of some things?
The legislature has been very aware and really has been a supporter of our economic development pursuits in space. And that I couldn't be more pleased about and grateful for, because it's made the job a lot easier. When I came into this position, we were facing the retirement of the shuttle, significant job losses in the order of 8,000 to 9,000 people, and a time of transition of NASA's mission so that public enthusiasm for space was diminished, is the best word that I can find. But we've been successful in replacing a significant number of those jobs, close to 4,000 that we've alone announced that are space-related jobs, and many others that are in the supply chain underpinning that. We see the future of what we're facing with a very optimistic sight.
You hold an event in Tallahassee every year, Space Florida Day. What's the purpose of that?
It actually is Space Day, but it is an industry day. And it is really not so much a Space Florida event as much as it is driven by the aerospace industry in the state that does visit Tallahassee to promote the importance of the space industry and its contribution to the economic well-being of Floridians.
So an awareness kind of thing.
It is an awareness thing.
Now, commercial launches, and you talked about commercial applications. Commercial launches have come a long way in a very short span of time. What is your priority for advancing those launches? What needs to be done?
Well, I think there are a number of things. We're working with the DoD and with NASA to take infrastructure that they both have. And in many cases, a lot of that infrastructure is already taxpayer paid, but it's underutilized in today's, for their mission needs. And we're attempting to partner with them to take that infrastructure and commercialize it for industry use. A classic example is the shuttle landing facility, which is no longer needed for the shuttle, but which is a taxpayer paid asset that can be valued in the 200 million plus category, and it has a long life of commercial utility if we were able to take it and operate it under commercial conditions and offer it to a marketplace that covets having a facility like that.
Well, that's smart business.
It is smart business. And there are a variety of other things that we're doing to make it easy for this new breed of commercial launch companies to come here and to operate here. SpaceX is a perfect example of one.
Now, with companies like SpaceX, with Boeing, with large centers in Central Florida, are you finding that they're fostering symbiotic industries coming in? Are you seeing that now?
Very much so. With every major company that we bring here to operate, they bring with them a need for a supply chain and for a free flow of talent from companies that support them, so it has a significant impact on the workforce, but then also on the local economies. And it is a statewide thing. Space today is in all 67 counties in Florida. So it's something that we're very proud to see.
So your success in Brevard is just as much a success for us in Orange Seminole in Central Florida as well.
Absolutely. We track not only who the companies are in each county, but how they're doing, and we were very much focused on the entire state. The space industry is not just a Brevard industry, it is a true Florida industry.
What about the drone market? Let's talk a little bit about that. What are the economic implications for Florida if that keeps building?
Well, there were three this past year, separate studies done by very reputable houses that project the value of the application of unmanned vehicles at near $90 billion over the next decade. And that is a significant marketplace. Florida was ranked 4th in the number of states that could benefit from that market. We have always been an aviation state, and we have always been a space state. And what is happening in the marketplace is that space and aviation are becoming increasingly integrated and dependent on each other for operation. And the technologies have advanced so that robotic platforms or mobile platforms are becoming pervasive in our everyday life. I prefer to use that mobile vehicle term as opposed to drone because in the future I see their application being pervasive and very, very beneficial to mankind.
Tell me again what that was, mobile vehicle?
Just mobile platforms or mobile vehicles,
okay.
yes.
Now, I always thought of drones in association with military.
Yes.
But there are many other commercial uses. Can you talk about a few of those?
Certainly there are many, many civil agency uses and commercial uses that can be examined, and I'll give you some examples. But you can fly weather and monitor weather much more safely, fly into the eye of hurricanes. You can use these vehicles for monitoring the coastline, for enhancing the ability of the Coast Guard to do search and rescue, or for local police forces to look for someone lost in a forest, because there are sensors on board these platforms that can spot the heat signature of an individual that may be lost. There are ways to monitor traffic, monitor crime situation that may be going on the other side of town in a safer way, without a high-speed chase. It can be used to support agriculture, so that a farmer can look at the condition of his field without having to drive it and monitor it on a regular basis to look at plant health, or whether it needs nutrients, many, many applications like this.
Practical things. Were you surprised at the rapid rise in the different uses commercially for something that really was associated with the military?
Well, the fact that it's a mobile platform that can be controlled relatively easily. There's still safety issues with introducing it into the national airspace because they are unmanned, but I believe that many, many companies are already looking at the use of these devices for giving them information, or for local package delivery, or for delivery of needed items to an area that is inaccessible otherwise. And the fact that they can be delivered so safely with reliable systems is important to their growth.
So a lot of potential there. Let's talk a minute about Exploration Park. With the economy now coming back a little bit, what is the park and how is it doing now?
Well, technology, or Exploration Park, is a concept similar to successful ventures that have been started outside of NASA Ames, NASA Stennis, and several other federal installations where there's been a need for a community of technology companies outside the grounds of the federal property. And Exploration Park was envisioned to be that. It would be an innovation park that would house a variety of capabilities, research facilities, so that international companies could come here, prepare their experiments, and then fly them or provide other goods and services to government as a primary or secondary market, but to the other companies that are in the area. So it's not unlike many technology parks and innovation centers around the state and in other parts of the country. It's just that this one would be very closely aligned with the Kennedy Space Center and the Air Force Station there.
Well, I did read when I was looking at the website, it says that it is unique in the fact that it's the only place in the entire world that is a quadrimodal transportation hub.
Well, and in fact, that's important. We have it's actually 5 modes of transportation, from space to rail to sea to air and road. So it's an interesting central point for the state space activities.
Now, you were talking earlier about some of the international aspects. You recently signed a memorandum of understanding with Swiss Space Systems.
Yes.
What does that entail? What does that mean for us?
Well, this is a group coming out of Switzerland and is very well backed by European aerospace companies. And they're planning on beginning operations initially in Europe, and they have chosen Florida. We're bringing them to Florida as well. They'll be flying an aircraft platform, initially doing zero-gravity flights to provide research time for researchers. They also will be carrying tourists on adventure tours, adventure experiences. But eventually these platforms will be flying a small rocket underneath or on top and launch that into space, either to deliver a satellite to orbit or eventually passengers into orbit.
How promising is the international market for Florida businesses?
Well, it's very much a target of our economic development pursuits. Federal budgets worldwide are going to be tight over the next decade, and other countries are interested in expanding their operations and in looking to U.S. markets, even though we will experience the effects of sequestration and some budget cuts in all areas of our federal activity, we are still a very, very large marketplace. And our commercial sector is the one that is really attracting many of these companies. So that you're seeing European and Asian companies and Latin American companies want to open up their operations in Florida to participate in that market, or in the U.S. to participate in that market. And we're aggressive in bringing them to Florida.
So that commercialization aspect, again, builds into the diversification. And you were talking about a trip, you took a trip to Brazil. I know their economy has been doing well, but I would not have thought of Brazil in terms of a space activity.
Well, Brazil, Italy, Spain, we have an agreement with the Spanish equivalent of NASA, their INTA organization. We've signed an agreement with the UK Space Agency. We're developing one with Brazil and with Singapore. And all of these governments and their industry members are seeking relationships with Florida because they see the opportunity for collaboration as an avenue to expanded activity and expanded market presence.
It sounds like you have quite a network building internationally already.
We think we've been very successful. It's important that we continue that. It is what we are facing in a grand sense is the democratization of space. And it is increasingly more entrepreneurial and less governmental. And we want to attract not only our own entrepreneurs and grow them in this country, but we want to attract these entrepreneurs from other parts of the world. It's interesting, 20 years ago, you saw major aerospace companies trying to become information companies. Today, we have very, very successful entrepreneurs who have made money in the information market, trying to become space companies. Richard Branson
Exactly.
and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos from Amazon. They're all entering the space business. And we're in dialogue with every one of those to have them setting up operations in Florida, and we hope to have them all here.
Space Florida, your mission encompasses education as well.
Well, we don't have the funding to fund education in all of the schools, but I would love to be sure that, or work to try to make certain that our schools have the tools that they need to introduce space and space technology and the interest in those as a driver for pursuit of STEM education.
Frank, do you think that the United States can regain its leadership role in space exploration?
I believe that we are a leader. We will remain a leader. We are going to see company out there. China and Russia and many other countries are clearly looking at increased space activity, but our leadership will be international. We will partner with other nations to achieve some pretty interesting things in space exploration. NASA is planning to go to an asteroid and to do a number of things on the far side of the moon that will help develop the technologies to go well beyond the moon. And I think that we'll be doing that in partnership with other nations and leading.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
That's all the time we have for our show today. Please visit wucftv.org/metro for interactive features, special content, and much more. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, I'm Diane Trees.